Chiro here for Umbra Games with a review of Assassin's Creed Chronicles, played on PlayStation 4, also available on PS Vita, Xbox One, and PC. Assassin's Creed Chronicles is a collection of 3 different games released episodically via digital distribution on various systems. In early 2016, a compilation disc was released with all 3, China, India, and Russia. Each game is a stealth action 2.5D side-scroller, which is quite a departure from the core Assassin's Creed series thus far. Now, I went back and forth between doing individual reviews for each game and one altogether, but since there's an overarching plot, a lot of very similar mechanics, and they're all just about 5 to 6 hours long for a single playthrough each, I thought I'd go ahead and wrap them up together. The first game in the series is Assassin's Creed Chronicles China, where you take control of female assassin Shao Jun, a pupil of Ezio Auditore, first seen in Assassin's Creed 2, as she returns to her homeland of China to destroy the Templar group known as the Tigers, in revenge for destroying China's Assassin's Brotherhood. There's also a lot of argument and scrambling over Ezio's Precursor box artifact. The game is divided up into several stages called memory sequences to stick with the Assassin's Creed methodology. Shao Jun starts with a few basic moves and learns new ones after each stage. There are 2 types of stages, ones with fairly large open maps, collectibles, and side missions, and ones that are effectively races, as your environment will often crumble down around you. The key to success, as in most Assassin's Creed games though, is stealth. As you navigate across the map, you can see the enemy vision cone, which you try and avoid. If an enemy spots you, their cone will turn yellow and fill up to red, in which case every guard in the area, and sometimes reinforcements, will come after you. Shao Jun is fairly fragile starting the game with 1 life bar. If you get the drop on enemies, you can assassinate them, and it's always best practice to hide their bodies, as if they're discovered, the alert will kick in. There are several places you can slip in to hide: dark doorways, bushes, behind bamboo curtains, or in crowds of people. Shao Jun obtains a variety of tools, including firecrackers to stun enemies, noise darts to distract them, and throwing knives to cut ropes and drop payloads to distract or take out enemies. Once you obtain Shao Jun's sword, you can face enemies hand-to-hand using light and heavy attacks, as well as parries and counters. You'll face a few different enemy types based on their armaments, from regular swords to wooden and metal shields, as well as crossbow. As per usual with the series, when engaged in full-out combat, your best bet is to set up a counterattack situation as to not leave yourself open. There are a few enemies that don't quite understand that though. You're rewarded with points for how well you handle enemies in each section of a stage, awarded bronze, silver, or gold in either Shadow, Assassin, or Brawler. Shadow Gold is the highest points you can be awarded, and is done by not being seen and not killing a single foe. You'd think in a game called Assassin's Creed that Assassin would be best, but it just includes taking out foes without being seen and not engaging in full-out combat. Brawler obviously is for the all-out combat and the lowest point award. Your status on all sections is tallied up at the end of the memory sequence, and you're rewarded character bonuses including things like extra health and bigger ammo capacity for reaching specific thresholds. Through the game's stages, you'll find a lot of climbing and platforming into the background and foreground and around corners. A lot of paths are marked in red to provide a visual aid on where you can cling to an object or path, which helps out a great deal. There were only a few instances where I had difficulty figuring out how to progress. The platforming overall is fairly tight, with that extra half dimension throwing things off a bit here and there, with down and up not quite responding how you'd expect, as well as moving from underhang to ledge grip sometimes being a little deceptive. Checkpoints are pretty frequent though, and if something is not going how you'd like, you can hit the options button and restart from the closest one. There are synchronization points on each of the non-race maps that will put icons on your map showing you where collectibles and optional missions are in the area. Optional missions can include freeing slaves, lighting objects, or assassinating specific targets hidden somewhere in the level. The graphics in China have a nice watercolor look that comes off very neatly stylized, especially with the flags and backgrounds. Objects in the background that move can look a bit awkward, but overall the graphical feel comes together nicely. When you complete the game, you can replay New Game Plus, where you receive double points to help you reach targets you've missed, and there are new harder to reach targets to go for as well. New Game Plus Hard Mode is also there, increasing enemies' reaction time. Assassin's Creed India is about Arbaaz Mir and takes place in 1841. Ezio's Precursor box shows up again in Templar control, and Arbaaz learns that it, combined with a massive Indian gem known as Koh-i-Noor, can be used in a Precursor temple nearby. Arbaaz is also in love with the Indian princess, whom he has to make a couple checkup visits on.
I'm sorry, my love. I have to.
For the most part, gameplay in India is very similar to that of China. Arbaaz uses a grapple hook, which compares to Shao Jun's rope dart. He employs chakrams to cut ropes instead of throwing knives, and has smoke bombs instead of Shao Jun's firecrackers. Smoke bombs create the perfect distraction as it blinds all enemies engulfed within the cloud for a significant amount of time. One major gameplay mechanic introduced in India is Arbaaz's ability to pickpocket and loot downed enemies, allowing him to refill ammo, but also comes into the picture when key items like crank handles and, well, keys must be looted from particular guards. The level design stays similar to China as well, split between the stages for style and the stages for speed. The point system have an addition with the presence of a point multiplier that increases up to 5 each time you hit a gold in any of the styles, Shadow, Silencer it's called in this game, or Brawler once again. If you get below a gold, it resets the counter. Most other mechanics stay the same though, New Game Plus with double points, etc. The art style is distinct, full of color, and more cel-shaded in places, but definitely more vibrant all over. From the main menu of India, you can access Challenge Room based on collection, contract, and assassination themes. Each level has criteria that awards medals, which opens the advanced levels for a total of 24 medals to acquire. Assassin's Creed Russia is the third and final episode of Chronicles, where we visit Russia in 1918, what I believe is the most modern glimpse of the world we've seen in the franchise so far. We follow nearly retired assassin Nikolai Orelov as he gets pulled back in for one more job, hopefully you guessed it, obtaining the Precursor box of Ezio Auditore. As Nikolai heads to the Imperial Palace to claim it, the Tsar and his family are killed, all but one daughter anyway, which I think there's a play in a couple of movies about her. Anyway, being in the 1900s, we have slightly more modern gadgets like a mechanical winch that not only lets Nikolai climb to the overhangs like the other assassins, but can send out a shock to short out fuse boxes or puddles of water enemies might be standing on. Smoke bombs have evolved into smoke grenades, but still have the same effect, and for projectiles and a melee weapon, Nikolai wields a rifle. Added mechanics include shutting off lights to shorten enemy vision cones, obtaining magnetic keys from soldiers to pass over landmines, and quite a few more sniper sections. Stages keep the race and open designs, but the racing platforming now requires a level of near perfection sometimes to execute. Frustratingly so. Every time you run off an edge in these games, your character will cling to it. If you want to vault something while running and not slow down, it requires precise timing before you reach the object. One key thing is don't forget you can jump off a scalable object sideways, holding a direction while pressing the release button. And if you die and start over, you can't be holding the sprint button, you can let it go and press it again to begin running, which seems like a minor thing, but the racing checkpoints can often leave you in danger when you respawn. Be prepared to get some practice, and luckily there isn't a penalty for dying and checkpoints are pretty frequent. Stealth is hammered even harder in a few places in Russia, as you often switch between Nikolai and a second playable character, armed only with a dagger that can't fight hand to hand. This presents some fun story situations where you'll switch to Nikolai, covering her as she slips from cover to cover, but when she fends for herself, be prepared for some restarts. Russia's art style continues to shake it up, this time looking like it's made from propaganda flyers. The cold black and white of the buildings at night contrasts starkly to the rising sun that can be seen in the background. Electric lights will bring back some color, but otherwise it sets a grave tone which matches the events taking place that time in history. New Game Plus, Hard Mode, and Challenge Rooms return in Russia just like India. Overall, the story arc of the game was fairly simplistic, but I don't really see that as a bad thing. I think the core Assassin's Creed games can often get convoluted with the number of characters they try and shove in and the years skipping around they try to involve at times. I don't feel much resolution from the story arc, which I guess is another thing this franchise seems to be good at. I will say this did make me want an Ancient China and India game, and I'm curious if they'll ever release a title in modern times. As far as stealth platforming goes, I will say Mark of the Ninja that I played a year or so ago executed most of these ideas happening here in a way that was way more enjoyable. I'd probably only advise people that are true fans of the series to try out these games. The varying art styles, level objectives, level rankings, New Game Plus modes that bring on several additional hours of play, as well as the low penalty death and restart checkpoints, combats some of the inherent issues you get from true 2.5D platformers, not always know where you can go next, the speed required platforming precision in areas, and some frustrating stealth situations. Rating all 3 episodes together as 2D action platformers, Assassin's Creed Chronicles receives a 61 out of 100, with 50 being an average game. This is Jiro for Umbra Games. Thanks for watching. As always, feel free to hit the subscribe button for more video notifications, or follow me on Twitter @Umbra Games.